A wedding is a really important event in life, celebrating the beginning of a new life for a just married couple. Today my husband and I went to my sister-in-law's wedding. Honestly, I didn't want to go, but I ended up going anyway. During the reception, I got served a kid's meal while everyone else enjoyed fancy French food. Confused about the mix-up, I asked the staff what happened. My mother-in-law approached me with a sly smile and asked if I was enjoying the wedding. Before I could respond, my husband, Mark, introduced us. I'm Sophia, 35 years old, running my own clothing company. We got married 3 years ago after meeting at a department store where he used to work as a security guard. Our life together is happy and we rarely argue. However, we're both busy with work, leaving little time for each other. The only issue is with his older sister, Abigail, who is 38 and causes some trouble. One day when my husband and I finally had a day off together, we planned to go shopping. But our plans were disrupted when Abigail showed up at 6:00 a.m. unannounced, asking to stay for a while. Confused, we asked why, and she casually explained that she's getting married soon, and the venue is close to our home. She thought it would be convenient to stay with us during venue inspections and dress fittings. She said, and just started to force her way in. I quickly objected, saying, "Wait. We finally have a day off together, and we were about to go out." Hearing this, Abigail's face suddenly brightened, and she said, "Oh yeah, we're going shopping." My husband and I exchanged a look, and I asked cautiously, "Don't tell me you're planning to come with us." "Why not? Is there a problem?" she retorted defiantly. My husband and I were surprised by her audacity. Then she added, "I want to go look at baby stuff. I want to make sure I'm ready for the baby." She seemed all set to tag along, taking the lead while we stood frozen at the entrance. "Come on, let's get ready. We'll leave by 8:00 a.m. How are we going? By car?" My husband's face darkened at her self-centered attitude. I rarely see him look so gloomy, but it seems he's never gotten along with his sister. He mentioned they used to fight a lot as kids. Is there any way you can leave? Mark and I just want to enjoy our day off together," I hesitantly asked. Abigail glared at me and snapped, "What? You want to exclude me? Wait, you're from a single mother family, right?" "Yes, I am. So what?" I replied. Her words were ironic as she was looking down on me, while claiming that people from single mother families lack empathy. She just reinforced a baseless stereotype, and it infuriated me. That's prejudice. I'm not like that, and look, even Mark is uncomfortable. I looked at my husband, and he was glaring at his sister. "What's up, Mark? You got something to say to your own sister?" She taunted him. "Of course I do. Please just go home." My husband's tone was firm. "Fine, but don't come crying to me later, especially you, Sophia," she said before leaving without another word. After successfully getting rid of her, we had breakfast and went to the nearby mall. But the unlucky start to our day seemed to continue. After shopping, we decided to rest on a bench, and unexpectedly, we ran into Abigail again. "Look who it is, the same too. Guess we ended up at the same place, sis," my husband muttered. Then someone called her name, a familiar voice. It was my mother-in-law. "Abigail, let's go see those luxury bags over there," she said, approaching us. My mother-in-law noticed us too. Mark, and Sophia, you too," my mother-in-law exclaimed. My husband sighed, sounding exhausted. Dealing with his sister was hard enough, but his mother made it worse, simply because she was unpleasant. "Is that bag from Infinity Tread Shoes?" She pointed at the shoe store bag my husband was holding. "Yeah, it is," he replied. His sister and mother exchanged looks and laughed. "Since when do you wear such cheap shoes? Look at our matching luxury brand shoes." Mark, choosing the wrong partner brings misfortune. Their contemptuous gaze was mostly directed at me. It was clear I was the main target of their disdain. I impulsively asked, "You talking about me?" To which my sister-in-law replied with insults. My husband interjected, saying, "Enough, Mom. Your consistent bragging about wealth has always been embarrassing and annoying." He was visibly angry, and I had never seen this side of him. His job as a security guard lent authority to his voice, but it seemed to have no effect on them. "Mark, you were born into a wealthy family. Are you okay with being with this uneducated poor woman?" my mother-in-law said. "Education doesn't matter much these days, and Sophia is." Before he could finish, my husband was cut off. "That's not true. Dad got his job at a major company because of his education. He's even the vice president now and will soon be president. Mark, you graduated from a famous university, and yet you're with a woman like this. You've really fallen." They treated me as an outsider, steering the conversation their way despite my husband's retort. They showed no remorse, and their nature seemed utterly rotten. My sister-in-law interrupted when I mentioned my earnings, mocking me for being a dropout. "Wait, 120 a month?" She laughed mockingly. "Sorry, I should have been more considerate. That must be tough, especially for a dropout." My husband tried to interject, but my sister-in-law placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Well, good luck." My husband was visibly angry, and I felt a surge of hatred inside me. These two seemed oblivious to our feelings, continuing the conversation at their own pace. "Oh, you both better attend the wedding. Mom's preparing a grand event. Yes, we're sparing no expense for our darling daughter's wedding. You're coming, right, Sophia?" The pressure from my mother-in-law felt immense. It seemed like I couldn't say no. Reluctantly, I agreed to go, thinking it would be okay if my husband were there. If he weren't, I would never attend such a wedding. The day of my sister-in-law's wedding arrived. I finished my piled-up work and even got a new dress with my husband for the occasion. Arriving at the venue, it was clear my mother-in-law wasn't exaggerating. The luxury hotel, the huge ballroom decorations, and the size of the wedding cake all spoke of extravagance. My mother-in-law approached us upon arrival, saying, "You both made it." Not that I wanted to make it. This might be my husband's true feelings, showing an unusual weariness as he explained to his mother, "This wedding cost $100,000. We have 500 guests, and the meal is a special course by a top chef. Impressive, isn't it? Only we could do this." She looked down on everyone, but passers-by only offered polite smiles and nods. I was appalled by her need to flaunt her status. My husband, reflecting our reality, asked, "Why didn't you spend this much on our wedding?" Our wedding was modest, costing $20,000, and it was simple, with only relatives and a few friends invited. Despite that, I was happy with it. However, in terms of treatment, it was indeed unfair, considering my husband is her blood-related son. My husband continued, "What are you saying? Abigail's fiancé, Thomas, will soon work directly under Dad. Of course, when Dad becomes president, he'll be groomed to be a key player in the company. It's only natural. We welcome him appropriately." Saying this, my mother-in-law laughed proudly. While we were talking, my father-in-law joined us and suggested, "Nova, it's almost time for Abigail and Thomas to make their appearance. Aren't you going to take pictures in the front row?" It felt like he was putting an end to our conversation, but it seemed he, too, was at odds with us. After speaking to my mother-in-law, he turned to us and said, "It's been a while, Sophia. You should feel honored just to be invited to such a lavish wedding. You'll probably never experience anything like this again in your life." Unlike my mother-in-law, he spoke calmly, but his words were laced with condescension. My husband couldn't help but retort, "Why do you have to say it like that, Dad?" My father-in-law replied with a cold expression, "Don't get me wrong. I never approved of your marriage. Remember the conditions I set." My husband glanced at me briefly before looking away. This revelation was new to me. Turning away from me, my husband spoke. "We both graduated from a famous university, earning over $100,000 a year." My father-in-law agreed, saying, "That's right. You remember well. And Sophia, she did drop out, but it doesn't matter. She's making money." Before my husband could finish, my mother-in-law interrupted, shouting, "Mark, look. Abigail has finished changing into a second dress. If it weren't for the fact that this was her daughter's wedding, such behavior would surely have warranted complaints for being disruptive. Others glanced at her, forcing smiles. Called by my mother-in-law, my father-in-law said, "We'll talk about this later," and left the scene. My husband murmured, "Sophia is much more amazing than you think, Dad." As he watched his father leave, I felt comforted, knowing he thought so. No matter what, he was on my side, and that truth alone lifted my spirits more than anything. When the bride and groom appeared, the hall erupted in applause, and the feast began with my sister-in-law's announcement. "We have a special course prepared by a top chef today. Please enjoy it." After her words, the waitstaff began serving the food distributed in his company every month are commissioned directly to my company by Morgan himself. My mother-in-law was momentarily lost for words. The socks, a seemingly mundane item, were apparently a significant business deal. I continued, "Morgan values our products, and that's why he personally chose my company. So being the president of my own successful company, I find your attempt to belittle me quite amusing." My husband's expression remained stern, but his eyes conveyed a sense of pride. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, was taken aback by the revelation. The onlookers, who had been witnessing the confrontation, seemed surprised as well. Realizing that her attempt to embarrass me had backfired, my mother-in-law tried to save face. "Well, it's still not the same as our world. You may have some success, but you're not truly one of us." I calmly responded, "I have no desire to be one of you. I value hard work, integrity, and kindness over flaunting wealth. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to enjoy the rest of the wedding." My husband and I walked away from the scene, leaving my mother-in-law fuming. As we found our seats, my husband whispered, "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Sophia." I smiled at him, appreciating his support. "It's okay. Let's not let it ruin the day. After all, we have our own success and happiness." The rest of the wedding passed without further incidents. We enjoyed the celebration, focusing on each other and the joyous occasion. Despite the initial challenges, the day ended on a positive note, reaffirming our commitment to each other. I mentioned that the products developed by my company were exceptional for their comfort, even after long hours of wear. Originally, the technology was used for t-shirts but was expanded to all clothing types. Everything Morgan wore was from our company. I was the one who suggested he try our socks for his entire company. Since then, our relationship with him has been close professionally. As mentioned, everything he wore was made by our company. That means even if you boast about your husband becoming the next president, if I report to Morgan about you, that might just remain a dream. As I said this, my mother-in-law's face turned pale, and she seemed taken aback. "You know him, the president of my husband's company. Did you know Morgan didn't go to high school either? What, he's one of those uneducated people you despise? Shall I convey your words about the importance of education to him, exactly as you said them to me?" When I mentioned Morgan's lack of formal education, my mother-in-law's face paled further. She seemed to realize that her attempt to demean me had backfired. She pleaded, "Please no, don't do that." It appeared that the threat to report to Morgan had shaken her. As my father-in-law rushed over, I repeated the same to him, saying I'd advise Morgan not to make my husband the president. My father-in-law pleaded, "Please don't do that. If that happens, doesn't your pride allow it?" My response was relentless. I remained surprisingly calm while confronting both of them. As I stood up to my in-laws, the surrounding crowd became noisy. Trouble had started just as the meal began, and only our table's progress had stopped. Sensing the commotion, my sister-in-law approached our table, unaware of the situation. I bluntly told her, "Abigail, by the way, I make over $120K a year, and my business is stable. Thanks to that, I didn't tell you the other day because you interrupted our conversation." Upon hearing this, my sister-in-law's face contorted, and she stood frozen, gripping the hem of her dress. After I fought back, the entire in-law family looked as if their souls had been sucked out in an instant. Everything they had been doing to harass me became clear. So everything we've been doing to you is just harassment towards me and self-destructive acts that undermine Mark's position. As I declared this, my mother-in-law suddenly changed her attitude and knelt on the floor, clasping her hands together. "I'm sorry, please, I beg you, forgive me." Seeing her, I wondered if she had any pride left at all. Her readiness to get on the floor so easily seemed almost refreshing. But it still wasn't a reason for me to forgive them. "No, I won't. You've judged and insulted people based on their appearances. You should face the consequences. Please, we've almost used up our savings for this wedding. If I don't become president and get a higher salary, we'll struggle financially." My father-in-law got on the floor following my mother-in-law's example. My sister-in-law watched with a powerless expression and then asked weakly, Dad, you're out of money." "Yes, I used all I had for this wedding as a gift to you too." "What about our honeymoon funds? Thomas's promotion?" Her voice trembled, but she was only lamenting her worsened position, disliking being brought down from her pedestal. It was all about her convenience, and she wasn't trying to solve anything by herself, always depending on others. "Wait, you boasted about being wealthy and were planning to go on your honeymoon using your parents' money. How shameful." My sister-in-law retorted, but she had nothing more to say. All three of them were on the floor, realizing the consequences of their actions. I declared that real wealthy people and celebrities don't brag about themselves. In other words, you're all just fakes. Know your place. My harsh words completely disheartened them, and my husband murmured his admiration. After that, of course, the wedding was no longer feasible, and we suddenly had free time. We left the pitiful wedding venue of my sister-in-law. Later, I explained everything to Morgan, and he understood. "So it wouldn't be fun for you if Mark became president, right?" "To be frank, yes. Don't worry, I won't forgive Mark for insulting you, nor will I make him president. Maybe I should transfer him to an overseas branch." Morgan laughed as he said this. A week later, my father-in-law rushed to us, desperate. "Please convince Morgan to cancel the overseas transfer." Apparently, Morgan was seriously working to transfer my father-in-law to another branch. When I heard it was Brazil, a half-day's flight away, I almost burst into laughter. In the end, Morgan didn't cancel the request, and my father-in-law, unable to go to Brazil, seemed to have resigned from the company. Additionally, there was a big commotion involving my sister-in-law's fiancé due to recent events. First, the wedding turned into a complete mess, and then the promised position at my father-in-law's company fell through when he resigned. My sister-in-law's fiancé originally worked in Italy, moved to America for the wedding, only to be caught up in this absurd drama. In the end, my sister-in-law's marriage was called off, and she was in great shock, ending up in the hospital. My mother-in-law, affected by the downfall of my father-in-law and the mental breakdown of my sister-in-law, lost all her hair and now looks like an old woman. As my husband said, the lives of these three people who freely insulted others lost their shine in an instant, like a diamond that turns out to be just a lump of carbon. The wealthy life of my in-laws was nothing but a facade of pretense. Life can hinge on a single event, influencing the future, and this was indeed such an occasion. As for me, I'm using my savings to prepare for building my dream home with my husband. While my in-laws' lives were becoming more difficult, my business was generating more and more profits. Moreover, perhaps due to things settling down, I become pregnant. With financial stability and a growing family, we must seem like celebrities to my current in-laws. Still, I made a promise to myself to live happily with my husband and our future child, never becoming arrogant no matter what.